Last but by no means least, James Haluch is going to talk to you about some of the things that people have touched on throughout the day, but James will actually talk about what it's actually like and how it's being developed on the ground. James.
Thanks, David. Good afternoon. Last one. Of course, the horrible realisation that all the speakers before have covered your points far more eloquently than probably I will, but we'll give it a wee shot. We have had some really quite fascinating insights this morning from Donald, Steve, Isabella about the political, economic and cultural position the industry finds itself in. And maybe, we heard from Stephen Glazer more about the opportunities and constraints that we now really are going to have to work within in the coming years. As the conference is so aptly titled, Making Change Happen, what I want to spend 20 minutes or so this afternoon is talking about a powerful enabler to really make this change happen, namely the development of a consistent collaborative culture across our sector, and how, using new tools available to us, we can achieve the illustrious 20% efficiency savings that we really do need to make to meet the challenges of the future comprehensive spending review. Obviously, the Olympic theme, absolutely tremendous London 2012. What better example, more powerful example of what can be achieved with teamwork, true collaboration, and a focus on the same outcomes. Before going to some specifics, a bit of background. If we got out the wee electronic voting bleeper things that we had earlier on and asked the room, what did the industry need to do to make a step change in efficiencies? Outcome focus. Mike picked it up there. Removing gold plating. Appropriate standards. More openness and trust, especially around commercial aspects. And maybe, most certainly, greater collaboration, not just between the clients and the contractors, the service provider, but maybe more importantly, between the second and the third tier suppliers, because that probably is where the greatest innovation is still to be untapped and also the greatest waste to be driven out. Focusing on collaboration, it's a word which we all band about so readily. If we ask for a definition, quite often there's one from a client side and one from a contractor side. Put most simply, it is working together. Whether this is resource smoothing, so we avoid that mad January, February, March, with the associated extra costs and loss of utilisation during the summer months. Integration of systems through the client, through the supply chain as well, so we all work to the same processes and procedures. And maybe, most excitingly, a focus on outcomes. Mike picked it up there. It's really all around where the function of the asset drives our behaviours, specifications, and avoids that gold plating. The same outcome really is a moot point, and maybe that is one of the reasons why the definition of collaboration is different between contractors and the clients. If we cast our mind back to this conference centre this time last year, or a wee bit earlier last year, Andrew Wolfensholm gave really a tremendous presentation where he summarised his work with Constructing Excellence and their publication, Never Waste a Good Crisis. In his presentation, Andrew produced an excellent graphic, this one here, detailing the industry reports since 1940s, from Simons in 1944 to the more familiar Latham and Egan Rethinking Construction in 1998. Each and every one of these industry reports has identified that if we are to achieve customer expectations, service outcomes, a key driver for change is collaboration. 50 years on from Simons, we are still grappling with what this actually means. As I look around the room today, and we've heard super examples as well from here today as well, there's excellent pockets of good practice. Excellent pockets of good practice throughout the sector. But we can't forget that 10 years after Egan Rethinking Construction, he carried out a further review of the industry and he rated us 4 out of 10. That was his view of about how far we had come 10 years on in 2008. Are we fretting for a reason? You know, our endless discussions, workshops on collaboration, do they really matter? Some quick graphs, and really it's to go into a wee bit more depth about what Mike was talking about. Firstly, this one here, one which hopefully some of you are familiar with. It's part of the Infrastructure UK report in late 2010, but it compared the cost of construction in the UK against other basket of European countries. And the conclusion from the report was we could achieve a 20% saving, that's £3 billion a year, by smarter procurement, appropriate specifications, and yes, collaborative behaviours. The latest Infrastructure UK report, which was the annual report in April, the executive summary of that report, right at the very front of that executive summary, stated, to demonstrate a change in the behaviours of clients, contractors and other stakeholders must occur to support collaboration on ways to reduce costs. CSR, very close up upon us again, as it was detailed this morning, probably greater cuts. So that was construction, but we are highway maintenance. We're a wee bit different. You know, is it quite the same? Another report came out in late 2010 was some really groundbreaking work carried out by the Confederation of the European Directors of Roads. So this is the strategic road authorities across Europe. And that report really highlighted the cost of maintenance. This is highway maintenance per kilometre across Europe. If we exclude Austria and Switzerland at the left because of the cost of their large tunnels and associated maintenance of those, the UK on the right doesn't favour particularly well. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment we bring the spend per kilometre down to other European countries, but undoubtedly there's room for improvement. So we know there's real savings to be made, but how do we emulate the outstanding London 2012 games makers, from Lord Coe right through to the 70,000, 80,000 people who really did a bit? How do we get our games makers to provide a uniform delivery, efficiency culture throughout the service, from the director at the local authority right through to the road worker and the supply chain? Really like a stick of rock with the same culture running all the way through. We want this to achieve 20% savings, but also to still deliver the key services, meet our customer expectations, and maintain the asset. We've seen from London 2012, the near impossible can be achieved brilliantly. So, from the outset, what's been covered by the previous speakers, but again, just to really hammer the point home, some basics really have to be put in place, and let's call that building blocks. What are the options for the size of the contract? Mustat covered this in one of his presentation this morning. What's the size of the contract to maximise efficiencies? Get the economies of scale, the cross-border working, but also not to lose control. The localisation. How do we do that? First of all, from HMEP, as was detailed this morning, a very good document's come out on Collaborative Alliance Toolkit. And that obviously can be used for looking at the appropriate size of the contract. What form should the contract take? And again, Mustat had a very good graphic showing PFI at one extreme to the in-house delivery at the other extreme. Picking up the HTMA publications, but indexation, where risk should lie. And I think the final building block, which we need to get right at the start, is something I've been involved with HMIP, and that's going to be called the strategic review. And this is where it's almost a peer review. 2 to 3 years before a local authority comes to market, a small number of people will go in at a strategic level and just challenge the authority. Is that actually what your customers want to achieve? Will that achieve your outcomes? Will it achieve the efficiency savings? Just to test, is that the right model going forward? Great. So we've used the various HMIP, HTMA documents. We've got a very keen contractor on board, hopefully, Ringway, talking about Cheshire. Very keen contractor on board. And we know from experience, we save 10 to 15% saving each time we rotate through a new procurement regime. But we also know that the pricing strategy of the contractor will dictate the behaviours and the way they collaborate for the remainder of that contract. So here's the challenge. How do we get that positive working behaviour so we get an extra 10% savings during that contract to get our magical 20%? And indeed, if I ask the clients in this room, how much real money do you get back during the life of the contract, not at the procurement stage, the life of the contract, I suspect not too many hands go up. Sometimes to find a solution, a new solution to a very old problem, it really is necessary to go and look outside the sector. And a number of authorities and service providers have been doing just that. Automotive sector, aerospace, defence. And an answer that's becoming increasingly established is the adoption of a new British standard called Collaborative Business Relationship Management Systems. In many ways, the BS is not bringing any radical new solutions. The standard actively encourages the use of pre-existing procedures and processes. Now, this is very important. As a new BS, it would be very easy to assume this is only applicable for the strategic roads, for TfL, for the big shire counties, but it is equally applicable for the small borough councils as well. Indeed, it is designed to be adopted across any sector and covers the life cycle of a project or a term commission. But here's the rub. The client, the provider, and the supply chain can be signed up as equal and integral parties to the certification. This whole team approach recognises that joint working is where you maximise the maximum benefits. What the BS 1000 does, it provides the sort of required tools to build that consistent collaborative culture. It's an 8-stage framework which really can be broken down into 3 distinct parts. Strategic, it really provides a foundation for the collaborative approaches to be adopted, the overall business outcomes, the operations to be undertaken, the line of sight, what actually we're here to do. It challenges the partners to question their suitability to collaborate. Interesting point. Challenge you to, are you up to it? Engagement around identifying future new partners. We heard from Birmingham this morning and Amy, what they've done with their supply chain on lighting, for example. Bringing new people in where it's appropriate. Validating the existing relationships. And most importantly, how collaboration will actually share the benefits. The real, sticky, hard money, how's that going to be shared? And how are you going to reward the supply chain who've come up with those ideas, not just at the time of procurement, but throughout the life of that contract? And then finally, the management phase. Making sure the agreed outcomes have been achieved, the services have been delivered as expected. And maybe something we don't do enough of, consider the exit strategy for members of the supply chain, or indeed even the provider, if they're not delivering the savings, the collaboration and the service that was expected. But also, at the end of the contract, how do we successfully wind down the relationships for the next organisation coming through the door? You know, there have been some tremendous innovations in collaboration highway maintenance over the years. What BS 11,000 is all about, it's enabling greater consistency. It provides innovation, it prevents, innovation happening on an ad hoc basis, whether it be on the strategic roads or the borough streets. And it forces the collaborative partners to work together to drive efficiencies and measure them far better than they could working alone. BS 11,000 is a new standard. It's only been about 18 months or so. A number of companies, such as Balfour Beatty, Atkins, Skanska, Costain, have achieved accreditation in other sectors, such as the rail sector, or now just tapping on the road sector for the big capital schemes. Many of the other HTMA partner organisations are very much on the way to achieving accreditation as well. However, at this time, there is only one accreditation in place for the end-to-end delivery of maintenance services. This is in the Highways Agency Area 3 part of the country, which covers South Central England, which had Weymouth for the sailing during the Olympics and Eton Dorney just off the M4 for the rowing. Area 3 is one of the largest and certainly one of the most political strategic road areas. So from the outset, the provider, Enterprise Michelle and the Highways Agency, spent a lot of time and effort on relationship management techniques, using psychologists to try and drive outcome focus throughout the team. This was quickly extended to include the supply chain. As the supply chain developed, the new framework which came along in BS 11,000 was really quickly adopted so we could take some of the improvement techniques and bring that into the Commission. And if you can pardon me for using the analogy of the rowing team, each pulling their weight to go effectively in the same direction. The happy crew that achieved accreditation was led by Enterprise Michelle and the Highways Agency, but included second-tier suppliers, aggregate industries, Carnell's, Chevron, very much supported by Towie Duffy, Martin is sitting over there. All this is very nice and laudable, but really what is critical for the BS 11,000 is the need to identify continuous improvement targets and how they're going to be delivered. So where have we gone? What have we achieved? I think, starting with the money. By the integration of the supply chain at the earliest possible time and identifying the need. Looking at what's the most appropriate solution, what's the scope, what innovation can be brought to the table, what's the programming moving the programme around to suit. Significant sums, about £12.5 million, cashable savings have been achieved. And a point to emphasise is the supply chain involved at the outset means they are focusing on outcomes. There is no guarantee they'll get the work. Moreover, it isn't about volume, it's about achieving the outcomes. 3.5 million hours without a RIDDOR, without a reportable accident. We've heard today about 2 fatalities on the road. I stand here today knowing a lot of 3.5 million's luck's in there. But there's also something else, working far closer. The solutions which have been developed by the people who are actually constructing the scheme, the people who know the best way to do it, get them involved at the absolute outset. And getting them involved at the outset means you've got an opportunity to challenge specifications, ways of working, established ways of working. One of the supply chain members, part of the team, Chevron and Enterprise Michelle, we funded and spent a lot of money funding work to challenge Chapter 8. Why do we need to cross the road at certain points, put out signs? Huge amount of money was spent, our money. We are now getting Chapter 8 changed. Now, for a lot of the boroughs, traffic management's a big expense. This has proved an opportunity to make a big difference, to challenge national specifications because it's coming from the supply chain. So obviously got money, we've obviously got the safety of our people, Again, Area 3 makes up about 9.5% of the agency's network. Supply chain involved at the absolute outset, different ways of working. Last year, Area 3 gave back, or gave the HA, 30% of their national carbon reduction target. One area, because that supply chain was so heavily involved. Recognition, which we all like, and, as I said, accreditation in May this year. As I mentioned, Enterprise Michelle is the first to get the end-to-end accreditation. However, many organisations in this room will be there in the coming months. Well, really, my closing thoughts are these. Within the boundaries of the reduced budgets we have, CSR on the horizon, do we, the leaders of the highway maintenance sector, have the vision to make that step change in behaviours to generate the efficiencies we need, while maintaining the asset, not starving it? Let's not waste a good crisis. Let's use our challenges as a catalyst for real behavioural change, from top to bottom, just like the stick of rock. Thank you.